So an introduction to the report editor. When you open the report editor in the Create Reports workflow item, what you will see is this screen, and I will go through the main components of the view. To the right, we have the Report Explorer, and more importantly, the field list, and that user interface part contains the list of categories with data that exists in the Vico Office database. So you see the locations, you see the project properties, cost components, as well as constructability issues. Each category contains fields which you can use in the report, so that is the information that you will see once the report is generated. To the left are the tools, and those are standard components that you draw into the area over here. So you can add a label, you can add a picture box, and you can add shapes as needed. In the bottom right is the Properties panel, and the Properties panel shows everything, all the information of the selected component. So if I select a table, you will see the properties of that table. If I select a label, you will see the font and color, etc. of that label. So this is what the typical report layout looks like. During the next hour or so, we will create a report that has header bands, so a report header, which is used once per report, a page header, which is used once per page, as well as a footer band, which can contain footer information like a page number or a date stamp. Then the most important part is this, what is now highlighted, which is the report content. And the report content shows which categories will be used in the detail band. So we got here takeoff items and takeoff quantities. The takeoff items word over here that you see is what we call a data binding. So this means that this detail band iterates through the collection of takeoff items that you have in your project. This detail band over here has a data binding for takeoff quantities, which means that it iterates through the collection of takeoff quantities within this takeoff set of takeoff items. We'll use that in the takeoff report. So let's start with a quantity takeoff report. We need to use two categories for that: takeoff items and takeoff quantities. We will sort the takeoff items based on their name, and as a last step, I will also filter the takeoff quantities. A question that came up several times. So if you only want to show volume and count and maybe a specific surface area, the report editor allows you to do that. So this is the report template as what we will define with a report header, a page header, two detail bands, and a report footer. So let me go to Office. I've opened a demonstration data set, which is, let me open the takeoff model view. This building, a demonstration data set which contains cost data as well, and I created some constructability issues with this data set as well. So I'm going to the Create Reports workflow item, and I will collapse this. I created a new category, which is this folder, and I will right-click on that and create a new report template. I will call that 1, the quantity takeoff report. To open the editor, I either click on the Edit Template or right-click and say Edit. And that will open a new window, which is the Report Designer or Report Editor. As you can see, the template right now is empty. So what I will do first is add the bands, really set up the structure for the report. I start with a report header. Then I add a page header. I also wanted to have a page footer. And I want to insert a detailed report, which is takeoff items. Within the collection of takeoff items, I want to see all of the quantities. So I right-click in this band and say Insert Detail Report and select the takeoff quantities. I will zoom out to show that structure. This is right now the structure for our report. Now let's start with defining the report header. I'm using a label component for that, and I just draw like this in here. And the title of this report is going to be Quantity Takeoff Report. And that doesn't look too nice, so I want to change the font. I want to use Arial, and the size should be 22. And I mentioned the property grid earlier. If I have this selected, I can maximize my property grid like this and change the color of the font in here as well. So right now the font color is set to control text. I can also type an RGB value. So 080 160 happens to be Vico blue, and that's what I want to use. I make that italics as well. And what I would like to include in the report header too is a logo. So I'm drawing a picture box over here. It is empty by default, so what I need to do is select an image. I click on this caret here and then click on the Browse button, and I want to use the Vico logo, of course. I click Open, and as you can see, it doesn't really fit yet. So what I need to do is change the fit mode, the sizing mode, to Zoom Image. And now it's correct. Anytime I change the size of this box, it will now be updated. All right, that's the report header. Then for the page header, I would like to include the project name as well as the report date. I'm changing this band to match the format of the previous one, so it needs to be RL and then 10 points. And I'm using a label again to put in that information. So this is going to be the project name. Double click to edit, project name, and let's resize that a little bit. I'm using the control and left mouse button to drag a copy. And the project name, now we have the report date. I'm going to select both and then again drag a copy like this. And for the project name, I want to use the project name that I defined in the dashboard. So for that, I'm going to use one of the fields. So I'm going into the field list, and the project name, of course, is in the project properties. So you see here the whole collection of things that you defined in the Define Settings tab in the Vico Office client. So what I want to use is the project name, and I simply grab it here and drag it into the label. As I do that, you can see that there's a small database icon that appears, which means that it is now linked. It is bound to the project name property. I also want to use report date. I actually don't want to use a label for that, but it is a pre-built component which is called page info. So I click on page info and I drag that component in here. By default, it is set to the page number, which is not what I want. So I click the caret, which opens the property, the properties of that piece of information, and I have several other options, including current date and time. So that's what I select, and that will automatically update every time I run this report. Now to finish that page header, I want to use a line to separate it from the rest of the content. Like this, and with that, let's see, it snaps to previous line. Every time a component shows up in red, it goes outside the margin that you have defined for the page, or it overlaps another component, as was the case now. Okay, so that's the page header. Now let's go into the detail band. So that's the actual content of the report. And we want to start with the takeoff items. And for that, I will draw a table to make sure that all content in here has the Arial font type as well. And I will draw a small table that only has one cell. I will then grab the cell by, or the table by hovering over it, and then I will resize it so that it fits the entire width of the page. It is empty at this point, and what I want to use is the name of the takeoff item, which is in the takeoff items category. So what I do is I grab the name and drop it into this cell. And as you can see again, that database icon appears, which means that it is now linked to the name property of the takeoff items collection. That's all the information that I need for the takeoff items. So I'm going to move this up to remove the margin. If I would generate the report like this, there is a lot of space between name and the takeoff quantities. I want to make that 0, so I'm going to move that all the way to the bottom of that cell. Next thing is creating another table, and I'm just copying by using Control and Control C and Control V, I should say, and dropping that in the second band. And what I want here is the name of the takeoff quantity, as well as the value and the unit used for the takeoff quantity. So I need 2 more cells. I insert a column to the right and another column to the right to make that happen. And that's my basic layout. To include the name of the takeoff quantity, I use from the takeoff quantities group the name property and drag and drop that in here. And then I need the value, and the value is coming from the location values collection. So if you have a project with multiple locations, you will see the collection of locations in here. You can always choose the project location, which is the total value for the project, obviously. So I'm dragging and dropping that into the table cell, and that will show the numerical value extracted from the takeoff items, or from the elements, rather. Next, I want to include a description of the unit, which comes from the takeoff quantity as well, and that is linked as well. Now I want to do something with the formatting of the project quantity value, and to do that I click the caret and select Format String. That has a number of input masks, and we want a number, and I want the number to have 2 decimals. You can choose 1 decimal as well, or 0 decimals, or a scientific annotation, but I'm choosing this one. And I also want the value to be aligned to the right. Now that causes an issue for the descriptions. I need a little bit of space between the value and the description. So for that I'm opening the property grid again. And I'm adding some padding to the left. So let's say I want to add 5 points between the value and the description. Now to improve the layout a little bit, I will change the background color of the name, and I want to make that a bold font type. Again, I will remove the space below the takeoff quantity. And last thing I want to do with this report is insert some more page info, which is the page number. And in this case, I do want the page number. I'm changing the font to Arial, and I want to align that in the center of the page. So therefore, I'm clicking the center horizontally. There we go. I want to center that within the component as well. And that is a simple takeoff report. I will save that and click Print Preview, and that will show the collection of takeoff items with the header and all the quantities that I extracted. Now the last thing to do with the quantity takeoff report was filtering it. You can select the takeoff items, or the takeoff quantities, which is what we want to filter, so that band, click on the caret, and then click on the filter string property. And that allows you to define based on properties, and I'm going to use the OR condition, and to filter out a number of items that you're interested in. And in this case, I only want to include takeoff quantities that contain the word volume. And in addition to that, I want to have those takeoff quantities that contain the word count. Click OK to apply that, and when I run the report again, it will show me a much shorter document. Only those quantities that include the word count and the word volume will be listed here. So if you need to set up a report that has multiple columns, you would apply a filter that filters out those names for you, and then you can get to a different type of layout.